Here's the elevated feather board. It locks down into the miter slot, two larger knobs to stop it from sliding, and it supports a feather board that's up off the surface of the table saw, and it's adjustable in the sense that this piece is removable, and if you need a height that's a little lower or a little bit higher, you can put different pieces in here to raise this up or down a little bit. Occasionally I've been doing a cut on my table saw where I wish I had a feather board that was just a little bit up off of the table, which is one limitation of these two feather boards. These are nice, convenient, easy to use, but they're low profile. If you're cutting something that's a little bit taller, these don't do you a lot of good. It took me 2 shots to cut this feather board. Here's the first attempt, and you can see it started to walk on me, and I was coming off of the proper angle. What I discovered was the PVC is so soft that I was just kind of leaning down on it, pushing it into the jig. The fingers of the feather board were allowing it to tilt at the wrong angle, so in the second attempt I had to be much more mindful of that. I think that'll work. So the idea behind the jig is when I tilt my blade at an angle, I don't have an insert to handle that. So I have to use the factory insert, which is kind of crappy. So I needed a sled that had a bottom on it to give me a nice clean cut. This is a small blade. It's 7 1/4 inch. I like it because it's a very narrow kerf, which I think will give me a good feather board. I have a 1/4 inch piece of MDF here on the bottom so that I don't lose too much on the full height of the fingers of the feather board. And I wanted to bring it forward. I didn't want this wonky angle to muck up my miter sled. So I created an auxiliary sled that rides on the miter sled, brings it forward. I made this miter slot locking feather board system a few years ago, and I've had good luck with it, and I don't see a great need to change the design. It's patterned off of this miter slot locking feather board that I purchased many years ago. As you tighten the screw, it locks in the slot and it holds the feather board down, so it doesn't turn very well, and it certainly doesn't move up or down in the slot very well. The mechanism is pretty simple. There's a slot there. This is a flathead screw. I have a little key in there to stop it from turning, and as you pull down on this, it forces these two pieces of the miter gauge apart, and it locks into the slot. I used a 6 1/2 inch blade in the table saw, and that cuts the slot. I initially goofed when I drilled the holes. I drilled them out here and they were supposed to be back here. These are just furniture bolts, quarter 20 thread. I originally intended to have the large knobs on the top, but the two of them were clashing with each other. So I had to reverse it. The smaller knobs go on top. I have a separate video that shows how I made the knobs. These are also quarter 20 thread stainless steel. And there it is, all assembled. I may have over-engineered it. I decided I wanted to have two bolts holding down the feather board, because I thought in my other feather boards a single bolt is adequate, but you really have to crank it down. And I also wanted to have independent control of locking it into the miter slot versus adjusting the feather board, which is why I have separate knobs down here in the track. And I put two here. It's probably overkill. I'm almost sure I only need one. But I figured if I over-designing it, there might be an opportunity in the future, although I can't imagine what it might be, where I may have to raise the feather board significantly higher. And I think fundamentally this design could probably deal with that. To adjust the height, this comes off, and this comes off. So you can very easily lower it 3/4 of an inch, just like so. Of course, if you need a different height than these, you could make another one of these or a similar block to raise this even higher. I haven't done an exhaustive search, but I've never seen anything like this, either homemade or commercially available. I have some cuts coming up on my table saw, or I think a feather board like this will be particularly useful, making the cut both more accurate and more safe. But maybe some of you guys have an application where you might need something like this, and hopefully if that's the case, this gave you some ideas. As always, I appreciate you coming by my shop, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next one.